He dies of a heart attack 1 minute after midnight, and the next thing he knows, he's standing on a station platform with his own name on the sign Wilbur, holding a cream-colored ticket for a single passenger on the midnight train. The conductor, a dead bookseller he dimly remembers from childhood, lays down 3 rules. No meddling, no speaking to your living self, and the one she repeats like a fuse burning toward something. Never, under any circumstances, be present when your younger self falls asleep. Because if a sleeping man sees his own ghost, he dreams his entire future in 5 minutes and loses his eternity. The ghost rides the train through every wound he ever caused. He watches himself marry the woman he loves. He watches himself take a bank loan that will swell a single bookshop into an empire of absence. He watches his wife bleed alone on a bathroom floor while he, 4,000 miles away, decides not to fly home. Ah! And then the train stops at Venice, 1974, the honeymoon summit of his life, and the ghost sees his 29-year-old self about to make the first tiny choice that will unspool everything. So he leans in where no one can hear him and whispers 6 words in his own ear. His younger self flinches. The ghost refuses to reboard. He stays with his sleeping body through the one rule that matters most, because he has decided, against all instruction, that his eternity is worth less than giving the man he was 5 minutes of truth he never had. What follows isn't a sentimental tour of second chances. This is Matt Haig's The Midnight Train, and its engine runs on a single stark premise. The dead can observe, remonstrate, even weep, but they cannot change anything. Only the living can change, and only if they see the wreckage before they make it. The locomotive itself is a stolen toy train from a childhood that already carried a brother's death, a mother's blame, and a guilt that never stopped breathing. Its portrait ages second by second, its tracks shudder when the rules crack, and by the end, one version of Wilbur will step into a void so empty the canvas forgets his face, while another version wakes in a hotel room with 80 years of regret downloaded into his skull and the bald stranger with a birthmark from the vision already seated in the restaurant, confirming every syllable. You don't read this book to watch a ghost fix his mistakes. You read it for the moment a ghost decides he will trade forever for one honest warning, and for the final line that doesn't promise a happy marriage, only the resolve to make it up as we go along. Episode 1: The Ghost at the Station. The water taxi slid across the lagoon toward Venice, and the 2 young honeymooners sat at the back of the small boat with the sun turning the water to hammered gold. Wilbur squeezed his wife's hand. She was wearing a pale summer dress, and her dark hair lifted in the wind off the channel. "I love you, Mr. Budd," Maggie said. "I love you too, Maggie." She laughed at how official and strange the first part had sounded. They had been married 3 days. The taxi slowed as the Grand Canal opened before them, palazzos rising on both sides in cream and ochre and weathered rose, their reflections wobbling in the green water. The air smelled of diesel and stone and espresso from the cafes along the embankment. "We'll always be like this, won't we?" Maggie asked. Wilbur turned from the view. "Of course. Why wouldn't we? Time changes things. But look at Venice. It's not changed in hundreds of years. This could be 1,000 years ago." They stepped onto the wooden dock and walked hand in hand toward their hotel, the Hotel Proserpina, a narrow building with wrought iron balconies and a lobby that smelled of beeswax and old velvet. Wilbur carried both suitcases. Maggie stopped to look at a small stand selling glass figurines, and he watched her without pretending to look at anything else. That afternoon they sat at a cafe terrace in a small square, drinking espresso and sharing a plate of biscotti. Maggie had her sketch pad open, drawing the curve of a bridge and the balcony above it. She looked up at Wilbur and said, "What's the scared hour?" "The what?" "The scared hour. You told me about it. You said when you were small, after your dad died, you'd lie in bed feeling frightened, and you called it the scared hour. I want to draw it. I want to draw all the words you've made up." Wilbur felt something tighten in his chest, fear and gratitude at once. No one had ever asked him to explain the words he made up as a child. "It's just what I called it. When the house was dark and I couldn't sleep. The scared hour." Maggie wrote it at the bottom of her sketch in small, neat letters. The scared hour. They walked on toward the Rialto Bridge as the afternoon softened into gold. The crowds were thinner now, the last of the market stalls packing away their leather goods and silk scarves. Wilbur was telling Maggie about the bookshop back home, about the manager Charlie and how Charlie played the guitar and how the shop was small but he wanted it to be something more. Maggie stopped walking. "Will you paint it green?" "Paint what green?" "The bookshop. When you make it bigger, I think it would look nice green, with a sign that has gold letters." "Green and gold," Wilbur said. "I'll do that." They stepped onto the Rialto Bridge. The Grand Canal stretched away on both sides, and a gondola passed underneath, the gondolier in a striped shirt singing something in Italian. Wilbur put his arm around Maggie's shoulders, and she leaned into him, and for a moment the world was perfectly simple. Then Wilbur looked across the bridge and saw a man standing at the other end. He was not an unusual man. He wore a short-sleeved shirt, a pale color, and flared jeans. His hair was chestnut brown and reached his shoulders. He was standing very still while tourists pushed past him, and he was waving. Not a big wave, a small, tentative wave, as if he were trying to get Wilbur's attention and was not quite sure he had it. Wilbur's arm fell from Maggie's shoulder. He looked down at what he was wearing, a short-sleeved shirt, the same pale color, flared jeans, almost identical. The man on the other side of the bridge was dressed exactly like him. He had the same build, the same posture, the same tilt of the head, and then Wilbur realized he was looking at his own face. He raised his hand halfway, an involuntary response, as if his body knew something his mind refused to accept. The figure across the bridge did not move closer. He simply stood there, waving, as a soft whisper curled into Wilbur's ear like breath. "You need to keep hold of this." Wilbur spun to see who had spoken. There was no one. The tourists passed with their cameras and their gelato, oblivious. When he turned back, the figure on the bridge was gone. From somewhere impossibly distant, a train whistle sounded. Faint, thin, arriving from no direction Wilbur could name. "You okay?" Maggie asked. "You've gone pale." Wilbur stared at the empty space on the bridge. "I'm fine. I just thought I saw someone I knew, my sedatable." He took her hand again, and they walked back toward the hotel, but he kept glancing over his shoulder at the bridge, where no one was standing anymore. The phone call. 52 years later, Wilbur was dying. He did not know this yet. He stood on the gravel driveway of his large Bedfordshire house, 81 years old, waving goodbye to his piano teacher as she climbed into a waiting car. It was a Saturday afternoon in April, bright and cool, birds singing above the sound of distant traffic. "Remember, slow and steady," the piano teacher called from the window. "You don't have to rush through everything." Wilbur nodded. He had been practicing Bridge Over Troubled Water, the Simon and Garfunkel song, but the fingers of his left hand kept stumbling over the chords. The teacher had been patient. She was in her 40s, half his age, and she seemed to have a calm certainty about life that Wilbur had never managed to locate. He went back inside and felt a tightness in his chest, something heavier than indigestion. He sat down in his study, surrounded by books that were old friends, and tried to catch his breath. The phone rang. He looked at the handset. The caller ID showed a number he did not recognize, from a Sheffield area code. He stared at it through several rings before lifting the receiver. "Hello?" A pause. Then a woman's voice, older now, but he would have known it anywhere. "Wilbur. Maggie, his ex-wife." He had not heard her voice in almost 30 years. "Maggie," he said, "how are you?" Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet, almost shy. "I had a dream about you last night." "A good one. We were in Venice. We were on the water taxi coming into the city. Do you remember the water taxi?" Wilbur's heart was beating too fast. "I remember everything." "We were happy," Maggie said. "I woke up and I was still in the dream, almost. I could still feel the sun, and I thought, I need to hear his voice, just once. Is that strange?" "No," Wilbur said. "No, it's not strange. How are you, Wilbur? Really?" He wanted to tell her the truth, that he was old and lonely, and he had spent 40 years building a business empire, and none of it had made him happy the way 3 days in Venice had. But he said, "I'm all right. I'm learning the piano. Slowly." "The piano? You? Terribly. I'm butchering it. Simon and Garfunkel." She laughed, and the sound of it was a doorway opening into a room he had tried to keep locked. "Can I call you again?" he asked. "Tomorrow? Next week?" "Yes," Maggie said. "I'd like that." After he hung up, Wilbur sat in his chair and felt the tightness in his chest spread outward. He was breathing shallow now, his heart stumbling, but what he wanted urgently, with what might have been the last focused energy of his life, was the letter. Maggie's farewell letter. He had kept it for decades in the attic, underneath the eaves, behind a door he rarely opened. He climbed the stairs, pulled down the loft ladder, and crawled into the dusty darkness on his hands and knees. Motes of dust floated around his head like a miniature galaxy. He found a chaos of old bills, trade magazines, tax documents, and then a single yellowed page. Not the whole letter, only the last page. He could not find the others. He was panting now, his head spinning. He carried the page downstairs and stood in the hallway to read it, his back pressed against the wall for support. The handwriting was Maggie's, looping, familiar, the letters slightly tilted. You are the man I fell in love with, and I think you still exist somewhere inside the person you have become. But I cannot reach you anymore. I don't know where the past hides, but I will meet you there. I love you, Wilbur, but I am also leaving you. Always, Maggie Wilbur recited the line aloud, his voice little more than breath. I don't know where the past hides, but I will meet you there. The pain came then, a fist around his heart. He sank to the floor, the yellowed page fluttering down beside him. The clock on the hall table showed 1 minute past midnight. By the time the ambulance arrived, Wilbur was dead. The station. He woke up standing. That was the first strange thing. The second was that nothing hurt. His back, which had ached for 15 years, felt loose and easy. His knees did not click. His breath came full and deep. And when he looked down at his hands, they were not the spotted, veined hands of an 81-year-old man. They were young. He was standing on a small, empty railway platform under a sky the color of pale ink. A sign on the platform read, in clean black letters, Wilbur. There was no other name. No direction, just his own name hanging in the quiet dark. Beyond the platform's edge was nothing. Not a void, exactly more like a great distance without shape, a suspension of landscape. Somewhere, in the far-off dark, something chimed. A ticket fluttered down and landed at his feet. Wilbur bent and picked it up. It was cream-colored card, old-fashioned, with elaborate gold script. The midnight train for one passenger only, non-transferable. He felt it then, deep in whatever substance now composed him. The knowledge that he was dead. The memory of the hallway floor, the page slipping from his fingers, the clock. He had died. He was dead. And yet here he was, young again, holding a ticket with his own name not printed anywhere on it but somehow understood. The train arrived without sound of approach. One moment the track was empty, and the next a locomotive was gliding up to the platform, gleaming black with gold trim, steam curling from its wheels. The train was old Victorian, perhaps, with a single carriage behind the engine, dark-paneled and curtained. A woman in a conductor's uniform stepped down from the carriage door. She was in her 50s, perhaps, with sharp cheekbones and gray hair pinned neatly under a peaked cap. Her eyes were a pale, clear blue. Wilbur, she said. It was not a question. He nodded, holding up the ticket. I am Agnes, she said. Your conductor. Please board. The midnight train waits for no one, but it is, at least for the present moment, exactly on time. He climbed aboard, and the interior of the carriage was like nothing he had expected. 2 long green velvet benches ran along each wall. The floor was polished wood, the walls dark panels, and at one end hung a portrait of a young man painted in oils, formal and a little stiff, whom Wilbur recognized immediately. It was himself. The same chestnut hair, the same clothes he was wearing now, the face of a 29-year-old who had not yet done the things that would undo him. Agnes motioned for him to sit. Where are we going? Wilbur asked. Back, Agnes said, and then forward, and then on. On to where? Eternity, but only if you make it there. Not everyone does. The train began to move. Outside the window, the dark was starting to change, swirling now, shot through with streaks of a thick, sulphurous yellow. The bookshop, Wilbur said suddenly. You, that was you. You were the old woman in the shop. Agnes inclined her head. The original owner, yes. I used to watch you come in as a boy. You would sit on the floor and read for an hour and never buy anything. I never minded. Readers are the ones worth keeping. What is this train? What happens now? Agnes sat down across from him, her hands folded on her lap. The midnight train is what happens. Find. Death is not the end. It is a journey. You will revisit your life, stop by stop. You will watch it as a ghost. You cannot change anything. You cannot touch anyone. The living will not see you with one exception, which you will discover soon enough. The final stop, if you have understood your life and made some kind of peace with it, you will be allowed to continue on to eternity. Happiness in eternity depends on how you view your life. That, I'm afraid, is entirely up to you. And if I don't make peace, Agnes' expression did not change, then you do not reach the destination. Outside, the yellow sky was roiling now, brighter and more violent. Shapes were forming in the clouds, a formation of aeroplanes, World War I vintage, their propellers spinning, and then one of them, a hurricane, erupted in a ball of orange flame. The fire bloomed in silence, and the plane began to fall. "My father," Wilbur whispered. "Yes," Agnes said. The train slowed, and Wilbur felt the first stop approaching. "When you step off this train," Agnes said, "you will be a ghost. Invisible, intangible. You must promise me you will board again when the train arrives. Do not linger. And, one more rule, never be there when you fall asleep. Never see yourself sleep. You understand? Why that rule? I will explain when the time is right. For now, we are stopping. Glossop Road, Sheffield, 1945. The baby and the toy train. The train door opened onto rubble. The street was a shattered line of brick and broken glass. A terrace of houses had been half sheared away by a bomb, and children were playing football in the debris. Wilbur stepped down and felt the ground, but did not disturb the dust. A boy ran straight through him, and Wilbur felt nothing except a faint shiver, like a distant note of music. He saw them then, a young woman in a worn coat, her face tight with exhaustion, and a small boy of about 6 with a sullen mouth and a fighter's posture. Edith and Dougie. His mother and his older brother. Dougie was kicking a stone along the pavement, and Edith was calling him to come inside. She walked right past Wilbur without a glance. He followed them into the house, a narrow terrace with a coal fire and a smell of boiled cabbage. And there, in a wooden cradle in the corner of the front room, lay a baby. Baby Wilbur. The ghost stood over the cradle and looked down at his infant self. The baby was crying, a thin, hungry wail, but the ghost felt something strange settle over him. A tenderness, a reassurance. He was here. He had been here. This small helpless thing would one day grow up and cross a lagoon in Venice and hold the hand of the woman he loved. The baby's crying stopped. His eyes, the same eyes. The ghost realized that he still had in death fixed on a point directly above the cradle. On him. The baby could see him. The ghost moved his hand. The baby's gaze tracked the movement. He stepped to the left. The baby's head turned. The infant was looking at him with an expression of startling, ancient calm, as if he knew exactly what this ghost was and had been expecting him. Dougie came stomping into the room, and the ghost stepped back. Edith was at the kitchen table, counting coins from a worn purse, her lips moving silently. "I got him a present," Dougie said. Edith did not look up. "With what money?" "I got it. Dougie Budd, you tell me right now where you got money for a present." Dougie reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gleaming object. A toy train, a model of the Duke of Gloucester, painted in rich maroon, its wheels perfectly round and its funnel sharp. Redgate's, Dougie said, and the ghost understood. Redgate's was the toy shop in town. Dougie had stolen it. Edith stared at the train, and for a moment her expression wavered between anger and exhaustion and something that might have been gratitude. "You can't just take things. It's for the baby. He's got nothing." She returned to counting her coins. "I'm talking to you, George," she said to the ceiling, to her dead husband. "Can you hear me? 3 mouths to feed, and one of them's a thief." The ghost stood motionless in the corner of the room, wanting to tell her it would be all right, wanting to buy her a house and wrap the baby in warmth and stop Dougie from whatever was coming. But he could do nothing. A knock came at the door. Heavy. Official. Dougie's face went hard. "That's him." "Who?" Edith asked. "Parkin, the landlord." The ghost knew that name. Mr. Parkin, the rent collector, the man Dougie hated more than anyone. The rules. The ghost did not want to leave. He stood in the narrow hallway as Dougie opened the door to a stout man in a brown suit who demanded the rent money in a voice like grinding gears. Dougie stood his ground, a 6-year-old boy squaring up to an adult who held all the power, and the ghost felt a surge of something that wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite grief. The train whistle sounded. The ghost had made a promise. He walked back through the rubble of Glossop Road and boarded the midnight train, where Agnes was waiting with a face like a closed door. "You delayed," she said. "I wanted to see what happened." "And what did happen? Nothing I could change?" Agnes nodded, but there was no softness in it. "There are rules. You already know the first one. Board when you hear the train. Now, hear the rest. 1. No meddling. You cannot interfere with the past. 2. You must never speak to your living self. If your living self hears your voice, the consequences are unpredictable and almost certainly catastrophic. 3. You must never be present when you fall asleep. A sleeping self who sees his ghost will dream his entire future, and if that happens, he will lose eternity. Why? Wilbur asked. Agnes' face sharpened. Because if he sees his future tonight, the train will stop here for both of you. There will be no destination. You will flicker out with nothing left ahead of you but the dark. A man who knows his whole future has already lived it. There is nothing left for him to reach. The train was moving again, picking up speed. Outside, flashes of memory raced past the windows. Street parties for the Queen's coronation, bunting and Union Jacks, and a small boy in short trousers staring at a television in a shop window. The ghost watched himself grow from infant to toddler to schoolboy in a smear of color and sound. "Babies can see ghosts," the ghost said. "My baby self saw me." Agnes nodded. "Babies are the biggest of all the mysteries in the universe. They have only just arrived from somewhere else. They haven't yet learned to unsee what's there. When you were alive," the ghost asked, "did you see me?" "In the shop, I saw a boy who loved stories more than he loved anything else. It's why I bought you that book, even when my son told me you had no money and never would. I told him books are to be loved and readers are to be protected." The bookshop. The memory surfaced like a stone rising through water. The ghost was standing in the old shop now, watching his younger self, a scruffy boy of perhaps 12, cornered by a red-faced man with a hip flask and a permanent scowl. Agnes' son, the man who had turned the shop into a business and resented anyone who treated it as a library. "You've been here an hour," the man said. "Buy something or leave." The boy Wilbur held up the book in his hands. "I don't have enough." "Then put it down and get out." But before the boy could move, an old woman stepped forward from behind a shelf. She was ancient, frail, with a lace collar and a hand that trembled slightly as she reached into her purse. "How much?" she asked. "Mother," the son said, his voice a warning. "How much?" she repeated, and paid for the book with coins from her pension money. She handed the book to the boy and patted his shoulder. "Off you go, old bean. Keep reading." The world needs more readers. The ghost watched his younger self leave the shop, clutching the book to his chest, and then the scene dissolved, and he was back on the train. "You saved me," the ghost said to Agnes. "I bought you a book. You saved yourself by reading it." The first time he saw her, the train stopped again. Glossop Road, but later now 1958. The rubble long cleared, a row of new red brick council houses lining the street. The ghost stepped off and saw himself sitting on a doorstep. His younger self was perhaps 14, wearing a scruffy school uniform and shoes with holes in the toes. He was reading Hemingway, frowning with concentration. The ghost stood in the street and watched, and a peculiar tenderness took hold of him, the man he had become, watching the boy he had been, separated by decades and the unbridgeable gulf of death. Two girls were walking down the pavement. The ghost recognized one of them immediately. Doreen, a girl from the neighborhood, loud and cheerful and always carrying a transistor radio. And the other girl was new, Maggie. She was maybe 13 or 14, dark hair, watchful eyes, a slight guardedness in her posture that suggested she had learned early that the world could hurt you. And she wore a blue dress and carried a library book under her arm. "You're always reading," Doreen said to the boy on the doorstep. "This is my cousin Maggie. She's just moved here." Maggie looked at the book in Wilbur's hands. "Hemingway," she said. "Is it good?" Wilbur looked up, and the ghost watched his younger self experience something he remembered with piercing clarity. The world had gone slightly out of focus, and the only sharp thing in it was this girl. "It's okay," Wilbur said. "There's a lot of fishing." "Fishing?" "In the book. The old man goes fishing." Maggie smiled, a small thing that changed her whole face. "I'd rather read about people than fish. There's a boy in it, too. He brings the old man food." She sat down on the step next to him, an act of casual courage that the ghost now understood was pure Maggie. She had always been braver than him. She asked him what other books he liked, and Wilbur started listing them: The Three Musketeers, Moby Dick, Frankenstein, The Secret Garden, and The Ghost Stood Invisible in the Street and Watched the First Conversation of the Rest of His Life. My dad died, Wilbur said, out of nowhere. In the war. I never met him. Maggie didn't flinch. My mom died 2 years ago. Stomach thing. The doctors didn't know what it was. They sat in silence for a moment, two children with matching holes in their histories. Come to the milk bar with us, Doreen said. Maggie's paying. Wilbur looked down at his shoes, at the hole in the toe. I can't, Maggie noticed. The ghost watched her notice, and then she did something that he had never forgotten. She stood up, extended her hand, and said nothing about the shoes. Come on, I want to hear more about the fishing book. He took her hand and stood, and then a black Wolseley pulled up at the curb, a POLICE sign above the windshield. Two officers got out, and between them, handcuffed and grinning, was Dougie. 19 years old now, his face bruised, his shirt torn. He was wearing the smile that the ghost remembered so well, the smile that meant his internal chaos had finally aligned with the external world. All right, little brother, Dougie called out. Wilbur stared. Everyone on the street was watching. Maggie and Doreen were watching. Do you know this man? One of the officers asked. Wilbur looked at his brother, at the grin, the handcuffs, the shame burning through his body like a fever. And he said, No, I've never seen him before. Doogie's smile didn't change, but something went out of him. The ghost saw it happen, a small inward collapse, and then the officers pushed Dougie into the car, and the car drove away. Maggie put her hand on Wilbur's arm. It's okay. It's not. I know, she said, but I'm still here. The ghost was pulled back toward the train, the whistle sounding in his ears, and the last thing he saw was Maggie's hand on his younger self's arm, a gesture of loyalty that had no reason to exist yet, and existed anyway. The bench and the letter. The midnight train carried him forward. The portrait at the end of the carriage was aging now, the face in the frame growing older in step with the memories passing outside the window. Agnes explained this was how it worked. The train moved through Wilbur's life chronologically, and the portrait was simply a mirror. Life can only be understood backward, Agnes said, but it must be lived forward. Kierkegaard, the train is the backward part. You are getting the understanding. The forward part you already did, for better or worse. The ghost watched a rapid montage of his teenage years, meeting Charlie, the boy who would become his best friend, playing dominoes and getting bullied and hiding in the library, a glimpse of Maggie on a street corner, raising her hand in a quick wave. Then the train stopped at a bench in Endcliffe Park. It was 1962, and Wilbur was 18 now, walking through the trees and coming upon Maggie sitting alone with a sketchpad on her knee. You're ignoring me now, are we? She called out when he tried to walk past. He sat down beside her, and the ghost stood behind them and listened to the conversation he had replayed in his mind 1,000 times. Maggie was drawing the lake and the small rocky waterfall. She had left teacher training college and switched to art. Why did you switch? Wilbur asked. Because the look on your face when I told you I wasn't drawing anymore. You looked disappointed. I thought, if a boy I barely know is disappointed, maybe I'm making the wrong choice. Wilbur stared at her. You changed your whole life because of my face? A little bit. Yes. Maggie's mother had died. Wilbur's father had died. These facts sat between them like shared furniture. Maggie talked about wanting to draw something that could stop time. Wilbur talked about getting out of Sheffield, about Oxford, about some big amorphous future he couldn't quite name, and then he stood up and walked away without asking her out. The ghost wanted to scream. He had done this. He had walked away from the bench and let another 2 years pass. And in those 2 years, he had gone to Oxford and dated a girl named Alice, a girl who didn't understand him and whom he didn't love. The train showed him the scene he could not bear to watch, but could not look away from. Cole's Corner in Sheffield, 1964, Wilbur handing Alice the letter that announced his full scholarship to Oxford lodgings. Food and tuition all paid for, the escape route he had been dreaming of. And Alice reading it with her face closing like a fist. I'm not going to see my little Wilbur, she said. She was not happy for him. She was afraid of losing him, and in that fear there was no room for his joy. The date ended in silence. The train moved on, and the ghost watched the palace cinema, watched Alice complain about the chalk ice being too warm and demand a refund from the usherette. The usherette was Maggie. Wilbur apologized to her afterward, alone in the foyer, and the ghost saw the way they looked at each other, a charged, unfinished thing, a conversation that had been paused and was waiting to resume. The ghost remembered this. He remembered seeing his own reflection on the Rialto Bridge during his honeymoon and thinking, "That's impossible. That hasn't happened yet." The memory looped back on itself. He had seen his ghost before he was a ghost. The teacher's last lesson. The train was speeding now, and the ghost was sitting alone when a new presence appeared in the carriage. An old woman in a tweed skirt and a cardigan, her hair a cloud of white, her eyes sharp as flint. She was holding a book and smiling at him. "Miss Graham," the ghost said, his English teacher, the woman who had taught him to love poetry and to argue about literature. She had died in 1975, he remembered. "Emphysema. You look well, Wilbur," she said. "For a dead man. How are you here?" "I traveled. I rowed a pea-green boat, a lovely little vessel. I've been sailing around for decades now, watching things. But I wanted to see you." She leaned forward. "Listen to me. I know what Agnes has told you. No meddling, no interference. She's not wrong exactly, but she's also not entirely right. There is a chance, Wilbur, a small one. If you are brave enough to break the rules, you might have a real life. A life with Maggie. A life corrected." Agnes appeared in the carriage doorway, her face like stone. "You should not be here. I go where I want, Agnes. It's not your train. It's my train for this passenger, and I will ask you to leave." The old teacher stood up and placed her hand on the ghost's shoulder. "Life is the most important thing, Wilbur. Not rules, not even eternity. Life. The difference between the voice and an echo. Don't be an echo." She faded, then, smiling at him until the last. Agnes sat down heavily. She is a troublemaker. She always was. Is she wrong? Agnes did not answer. Outside the window, the night was darkening, and the ghost felt the train slowing toward something he did not want to face. "The night that changed everything," he said. "Yes," Agnes said. "July the 27th, 1964. The train stopped. The ghost did not move. "If you stay here," Agnes said quietly, "you will feel a sensation of being stuck. It is your own trap. You must step off and face it. It's the only way through." The ghost felt his body begin to flicker. His legs went transparent, the green velvet of the seat visible through his denim jeans. Terrible claustrophobia seized him, the sense of being pinned in place while the world moved on without him. He stood up and stepped off the train. The Rolling Stones, City Hall, Sheffield. The noise hit him like a wall of sound. The Rolling Stones were on stage. Mick Jagger in a white shirt and checked trousers, Brian Jones bent over his guitar, the crowd a heaving mass of sweat and hysteria. Around and around, the Chuck Berry cover was tearing through the hall at maximum volume. The ghost found his younger self in the crowd, 19-year-old Wilbur, Oxford scholarship in his pocket, standing beside Dodgy, who was 25 and drunk and had just been released from 6 weeks in prison for selling stolen cutlery. "Oxford," Dodgy said, "the word a weapon. You'll go off to Oxford and leave the rest of us in the dirt." "I'm not leaving anyone," Wilbur said, but the ghost could hear the lie in it. He had been leaving. He had been planning his escape since he was a child, and Dougie, for all his chaos, had seen it clearly. Then Maggie appeared, and the ghost's whole focus narrowed to her. She was wearing a white dress and was on the arm of a man the ghost barely remembered. Tommy, a tall, bequiffed boyfriend who looked at Wilbur with the easy confidence of someone who had never been afraid of anything. Dougie said something crude, loud enough for Maggie to hear. Tommy stepped forward and Wilbur stepped between them. The ghost watched his younger self's face and saw the moment it all went wrong. A single second, a couple of drum beats. Wilbur could have walked away. He chose to stay. He chose to push Tommy back, and then the pub next door was a chaos of fists and broken glass, and Doogie's demonic smile as a glass smashed against his head and he went down laughing. Dudgy pulled a knife. The ghost watched, frozen, as his brother slashed the blade across a man's shirt. Not deep, just enough to draw blood, just enough to make everyone stop. "Go," Dougie said, and Wilbur followed him out the side exit. The ghost was pulled after them, dragged by an invisible force into the back seat of Doogie's car, he could not escape. He was strapped into this memory, and he would have to watch all of it. The chase. Dodgy drove like a man fleeing the end of the world. The streets of Sheffield blurred past, and behind them, a police car was wailing. I had to look after her, Dougie was saying, his hands white on the wheel. After Dad died, I had to look after Mom. You were a baby. You don't remember. She was on the floor for days. She wouldn't eat. I did the shopping. I was 6. And now you're going to Oxford and you're leaving me with her again. I'm not leaving you, Wilbur said. You are. Everyone leaves. The streetlights streaked past. The police car was gaining. The ghost sat in the back seat, a passenger in his own worst memory, and saw Doggy for the first time as what he truly was, not a thug, not a chaos agent, but a boy who had been forced to become a man too early and had never learned how to do it without breaking things. A rabbit hopped onto the road ahead, frozen in the headlights. "Rabbit!" Wilbur shouted. Dougie swerved. The car left the road and hit a sycamore tree at something close to 50 miles per hour. The sound was not a crash, but a crumpling, a compression of metal and bone and time. Wilbur, who had been reaching for the brake with his leg, was thrown sideways. His head struck the window. His ribs cracked. Dougie went through the windscreen. The ghost was standing outside the car now, looking down at his brother. Doogie's body was broken beyond repair, his face peaceful in a way it had never been in life. The ghost knelt beside him and wanted to weep, but ghosts cannot cry. "I'm sorry," the ghost said, though Dougie could not hear him. "I'm sorry I didn't know you. I'm sorry I tried to leave. I love you. I never said it. I love you, Dougie." The police arrived. An ambulance. Wilbur was pulled from the wreckage, alive, unconscious, his body intact enough to survive. Dougie was pronounced dead at the scene. The ghost stood in the darkness beside the tree and understood that this moment, this single, pointless, rabbit-haunted second, would be a magnetic field for the rest of his life. Everything Wilbur did after this would be pulled toward it. Every success would be an attempt to justify his survival. Every failure would be measured against this loss. The days after, back on the train, the ghost sat beside Agnes and said nothing for a long time. "Do you know what it's like," he finally asked, "to see the worst moment of your life and be able to do nothing to stop it?" Agnes looked down at her hands. "I understand. I'm sorry." The train was moving again, and outside the window, a montage of days unspooled like film. The funeral. Doogie's coffin being lowered into the ground. Edith on Valium, her face slack and distant. Wilbur drinking in his room, the Oxford letter crumpled in the bin. Then the conversation the ghost would never forget. Wilbur standing in the kitchen telling his mother he was still going to university. "Dodgy can't go anywhere," Edith said. "Why should you? I have to live my life." "Your life killed him." Edith's voice was flat. "He was trying to protect you. He was always trying to protect you. Then now is dead, and you're alive, and you're leaving." "Mom," I tried to grab the wheel. Edith fixed him with a stare that had nothing left in it but bitterness. "I didn't want another one, you know. After Dudgy, I was done, but your father wanted another, and then he died and I was left with you. Another mouth to feed, another burden." The ghost watched his younger self absorb this blow. It landed somewhere deep, somewhere that would never fully heal. Nothing Edith said after could take it back. He had been a burden. He had not been wanted. He had survived, and the one who was wanted had died. Edith began to hum Singin' in the Rain, retreating into a place beyond pain where nothing could reach her. The ghost turned away from the window and looked at Agnes. "I spent my whole life trying to be successful enough to justify being alive." "I know," Agnes said, "and it never worked. I know that too." The train rushed on, and the ghost watched himself standing on a rooftop in Sheffield, 17 years old, looking down at the street below. The impulse was clear, the calculation of distance and speed and finality. The ghost felt his own non-existent heart seize, but he knew how this ended. He had lived it. The boy on the roof stood there for a long minute. Then he took a step back, then another. Then he went inside, picked up a book from the pile beside his bed, and began to read. The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck. The ghost remembered the line that had saved him. "There ain't no sin and there ain't no virtue. There's just stuff people do." The train was slowing again, and the ghost felt the pull of another stop. But Agnes held up her hand. "There is one last rule I must tell you now," she said. "You must never see yourself sleep. Never. If your sleeping self sees you, if he sees his ghost, he will dream his entire future. Every joy and every sorrow, all at once. And if he sees his future tonight, the train will stop here for both of you. There will be no destination. You will flicker out with nothing left ahead of you but the dark. Do you understand?" The ghost nodded. He understood. But somewhere in the quiet part of him that the old teacher had awakened, he was already calculating what might be possible if rules were only guardrails and not walls. The portrait at the end of the carriage had aged again. The train moved through the dark toward the late 1960s, toward Doogie's grave and the kiss that would change everything, toward a marriage that would rise and fall and a life that was not yet done unspooling. The ghost sat on the green velvet bench and watched himself grow older in a painted frame, knowing the worst was behind him and the hardest was still to come. Episode 2: The Man Who Lost His Compass. The midnight train stopped at a cemetery in the summer of 1969, and the ghost stepped off into the smell of cut grass and damp stone. He found his younger self sitting on a green wooden bench in front of a headstone. The living Wilbur, age 25, in a shirt with 2 buttons undone, his hair longer now, a copy of the Society of the Spectacle lying face down beside him. He was picking at a scab of paint on the bench with his thumbnail. The headstone read, DOUGLASJAMESBUDD, 1939-1964, a beloved son and brother, NOWATREST, 5 years since the crash. 5 years of carrying a weight that had no shape but never lightened. He had just finished his shift at Bagdale's bookshop and was sitting here instead of going home. The ghost stood among the graves and understood what he could not have understood then. Grief is not a passage, but a landscape. You learn to live in it because you have no choice. Then a figure appeared at the edge of the cemetery path, and the ghost's non-existent breath caught Maggie. She was wearing a simple summer dress and carrying a small bunch of flowers. Her hair was shorter than it had been in 1962, and there was something different in the way she walked, a sureness, an ownership of her own body. She saw him on the bench and walked directly toward him. "All right," she said. He looked up, startled. "Maggie, what are you doing here?" "I come sometimes. To see Dougie." She sat down beside him on the bench without asking permission. "I was thinking about him today, the night we met. He was in that police car, and you said you didn't know him." He flinched. "I'm not proud of that. I knew then." She placed the flowers at the base of the headstone. "I came to his funeral, you know. I stood at the back. I didn't think you'd want to see anyone." The ghost watched his younger self absorb this information. He had not known. He had not seen her there. The funeral had been a blur of Valium and his mother's silence and the unbearable weight of being the one who survived. "I stopped drawing," Maggie said quietly, "after we talked on the bench. In Encliffe Park, you asked about my art and I said I wasn't doing it anymore, and your face went—" She made a small gesture with her hand. "You looked so disappointed. Not at me, for me. And I went home that night and I thought, why did I stop? Why did I give up the thing I loved? And the next week I quit teacher training and enrolled in art college." He stared at her. "Because of me? Because of your face?" She smiled, a small private smile. "You have no idea what you've done, do you? To people? You just walk around being yourself and people rearrange their lives." The ghost felt something twist inside him. He remembered this conversation. He remembered how she had said these exact words, and how he had not fully heard them at the time. "I think about him a lot," the younger Wilbur said, looking at Doogie's headstone. "Every day, every single day since it happened." "You were there?" Maggie said. "The night he died." "I was there too. I saw you. I saw your face when you ran out of the pub. You looked like you were trying to save him." "I couldn't. No, but you tried." She touched his hand, just briefly, on the bench. "I always thought you were brave, even when you were a boy on a doorstep with a hole in your shoe, reading Hemingway. You were the bravest person I'd ever met. You still are." "Why? Because you're still here. You're still trying. You have a job you love. You read books and you care about things. You didn't let it destroy you." The ghost watched his younger self's face crack open. It was a small crack, just a softening around the eyes, a tremble in the jaw, but it was the first time since Doogie's death that he had allowed anyone to see inside. "You were the only shining thing," he said. His voice was unsteady. "That night, at the concert, in the middle of all of it, you were there, and you were the only shining thing." Maggie did not look away. She held his gaze with a steadiness that the ghost recognized, because he had been steadied by it for years afterward. It was the quality he would later lose, the quality he would spend decades trying to get back. "What would you do," she asked, "if you weren't afraid?" The ghost felt the question land in his younger self's chest like a stone in still water. "I'd ask for your phone number," he said. "I have a boyfriend. His name's Edward. He's an art teacher." Maggie reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled leaflet. "A day of education reform and international solidarity against the slaughter in Vietnam." She smoothed it against her knee and wrote something on the back. "But here it is anyway." She pressed the leaflet into his hand. "Maggie," he said, "when I'm with you, I feel I don't know how to say it. Free. I feel free." Maggie looked at him the way the ghost remembered being looked at, a way no one had looked at him since. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was small and brief and entirely on the lips. When she pulled back, they both said, "I'm sorry," at exactly the same moment. And then they laughed, a fragile, surprised laugh, and the ghost stood there in the cemetery among the stones and felt the ache of a happiness he knew would not last. The train wobbles. Back on the midnight train, the ghost sat across from Agnes and tried to steady himself. "You spoke to her," the conductor said. Her voice was flat, but her fingers were tapping against her leg. "Not to your living self, it'll give you that, but you spoke to her. You can't. You mustn't. Do you understand what you've done? I didn't speak to her. I was standing 10 feet away. She couldn't hear me, but you wanted to. The wanting is enough to cause a wobble." Agnes gestured at the carriage walls. "The train is struggling. It's been struggling since the cemetery stop. The timeline doesn't like being watched by someone who wants to change it." The ghost looked out the window. The sky was a strange color, not quite the yellow of his father's exploding plane, but something unstable, something that flickered between violet and gray. "Agnes," he said, "what would happen if I actually did it? If I intervened? I've told you, you are the ghost of this specific life to any Wilbur anywhere. This one, if you alter the timeline, if you change even one significant event, you erase the life that created you. You erase yourself. You erase the midnight train. Everything unravels." "But Miss Graham said, Miss Graham has theories." The conductor's voice sharpened. "Theories that have never been tested because no one has ever been foolish enough to test them. She rode a pea-green boat. She never came back to speak to her living self. She doesn't know." The train rattled, a deep shudder that ran through the floor and up into the seats. The portrait at the end of the carriage, the ghost at 25 now, his face older, his hair at its longest swung slightly on its hook. "There is something I haven't told you," Agnes said quietly. "About my own journey. About what happens if you try." She looked down at her hands. For a moment, the ghost saw the old woman who had bought him a book when he was a boy, the same kindness, the same buried weight. "I had a son," she said. "Arthur. You knew him as Mr. Bagdale. He was not always the way you remember him. He was a bright boy, once. He loved books the way I did. But his father died, and I was not enough. I threw myself into the shop, into matching books to readers, into being useful to strangers, and Arthur grew up in the margins of my attention. By the time I realized he had become the man you knew. The hip flask, the resentment, the contempt for customers who read without buying." The train passed through a dark patch of sky, and the lamps flickered. "When I died," she said, "I wanted to go back. Fact is, to fix it. To be the mother I should have been. I tried. The train wouldn't let me. It brought me here, to the journey, and showed me what I had done, and all I could do was watch. I have been watching for a very long time, old bean, and I have never seen anyone successfully change their past." The ghost said nothing. Outside the window, the sky was settling back into night, and the train was picking up speed, rushing now through the year 1970, through the breakup with Edward, through the first proper dates with Maggie, through the long phone calls and the walks in Endcliff Park, and the slow, careful building of something that felt like a future. The Crucible. The train stopped in 1971 outside the Crucible Theater on its opening night. Through the carriage window, the ghost could see the lights, the smartly dressed crowds, the champagne flutes catching the glow of chandeliers. He stepped off alone. The dreamer would not appear until Venice, and watched his 27-year-old self stand in a reception room crowded with Sheffield's cultural elite, holding a glass of warm white wine and feeling utterly out of place. Maggie had been in London for 19 months. She had gone south soon after their first kiss in the cemetery. The ghost had watched from the train window as she told him she needed to leave her art, her opportunity, a gallery internship she couldn't turn down. He had said he understood. He had been lying. 19 months of letters, 19 months of working at the bookshop and saving money and trying not to think about the girl who had kissed him and then left. 19 months of pretending he wasn't waiting. And then in the middle of the reception, the younger Wilbur looked across the room and saw her. Maggie was standing near the bar, wearing a blue dress that the ghost remembered with painful clarity. Her hair was different again, shorter, more deliberate. She was holding a glass of wine and laughing at something someone had said, and when she turned and saw him, her face opened like a door swinging wide. The ghost watched his younger self cross the room. He watched the way Maggie's hand went to her throat, the way her smile became something deeper, something that involved her whole body. "You're back," he said. "I'm back. For good? For good." London, was she shook her head. London was lonely, even with people, especially with people. I missed Sheffield. I missed the hills. I missed. She stopped. What? I missed you. She said it plainly, without drama, as if it were a fact of geography. I kept telling people about this boy I knew, this boy who read books on his doorstep and warned me about broken glass and lied about knowing his brother to protect himself. And I thought, why am I talking about him in the past tense? He's still there. He's still himself. The ghost saw the precise moment when the locked door of his younger self's chest swung open. He thought of Levin and Kitty in Anna Karenina, the scene where Levin sees Kitty in the carriage and knows, with a certainty that bypasses logic, that he loves her. "I'm still myself," he said. "I'm still? I'm here." Maggie set down her glass. "Do you want to get out of here?" Yes. He walked out of the Crucible and into the Sheffield night. The street was quiet. The noise of the reception faded behind them. Maggie stopped under a street lamp and turned to face him. "Kiss me, Wilbur," she said. "Just kiss me." He kissed her, and the ghost felt the relief of it like air after drowning. He had loved this kiss. He had lived in this kiss for years afterward, returning to it like a bookmark in the story of his life. Maggie's mouth was soft and certain. Her hand was on the back of his neck. The world was reduced to a circle of lamplight and the sound of their breathing. "I've wanted to do that," he said, "since I was 14 years old. Then why did you wait so long?" "Fear." Maggie smiled. "What are you afraid of now?" "Nothing," he said, and meant it. "With you, I'm not afraid of anything." They spent the night together in the house he had bought for his mother, trying to be quiet, failing, laughing about failing. The ghost watched, from outside the window, the silhouettes behind the curtain, the glow of a lamp, and let himself feel something he had not allowed himself to feel during the earlier stops: simple, uncomplicated joy. In the weeks that followed, the train rushed through a montage of happiness so swift and bright it made the ghost dizzy. Pub lunches and cinema dates, walks in the Peak District where Maggie taught him the names of wildflowers. Her hand on his chest after a nightmare about Dougie. "What did you dream about?" she would ask, and he would say he didn't remember, and she would pretend to believe him. The nightmares stopped for a while. Love was a kind of anesthetic, and he let it numb him.